let's start with how you define purpose.
Oh, big question.
And impact. Yeah.
So I work for Founders Pledge, and the overarching goal of Founders Pledge is to really drive as much money as possible to high impact organizations. So if I gave you $100 and you said, right, okay, I really care about mental health, I want to have an impact in that space, then you would probably care about which organization is going to do the most possible good with that $100. And so that's what we really focus on, which is there's 10 million charities in the world. Some are okay, some are great, some are not so good. So how can we find those really, really amazing ones?
I'm curious, what's a good charity? What's a bad charity?
Oh, well, the good ones are the ones that leverage a lot of data and that they're really scaling. They have models that allow them to scale. The ones that are less effective are often the ones that are like enormously local and not necessarily thinking big. I guess when I think about impact, I think about how can we use the kind of principles that we use in tech and in VC, how can we use that for nonprofits? Like how can they use data? How can they use this kind of like hits-based models? How can they be taking risks? How can they be innovating? And I think the ones that are not doing that are the ones that are being left behind.
And Barinder, you had so many lives through this within this conversation of impact. So how do you define it?
I'm an activist by nature, so I have reinvented myself many times, and I have learned that I can have impact without a title. And what impact means for me is motivating and mobilizing change without excluding too many people. And I think that's a conversation we need to have more. It's not about either ors. It's about coming together. I think the pendulum shift that's happening to the extreme left or the extreme right is happening because we don't have a foundation that people can call home. And so I think impact is being as inclusive as possible and moving the needle so that we're looking at the greater good without shaming or making anybody feel vulnerable.
So some of us here have corporate lives, well-paid corporate jobs, and you chose the other way. And you doubled because you went to government, which is also not the best salary you can get up there. What drove you to that path?
So this is going to sound a little bit smug, and I don't mean it to, but to me there really wasn't an option. So my great-grandma was one of the founders of one of the longest-standing shelters for women and children escaping abusive homes. My mum works in mental health. My dad works in prison reform. So I think I kind of just always envisaged that I would end up in some kind of purposeful role. I probably could be making more money if I was working in, I don't know, some kind of sales role for a tech company or something. I also think that it's possible for, specifically within the nonprofit sector, for them to try and pay well. If they pay slightly better, then they're going to attract the smarter people and they're going to have more impact. So I'm hoping that we can kind of gradually move away from this idea that nonprofits are, underpaying. And we can move towards making sure that they are attracting the best possible people for the jobs.
And Barinder, when you address that, let's get closer to this topic of innovation within this, right? So you ran for mayor of Surrey, which I've heard was a pretty baller campaign, even though it became a little short. You achieved a lot by pursuing that. How did that step take you closer to what you do today, and how do you unleash innovation in the space that you are in today?
So my failure, my campaign slogan was "One Tough Mother." My failure running for mayor is an example of how you can't define failure by the actual outcome. It's what I gained along the journey. What I was able to do was fundamentally change the narrative of the campaign. I had been on council for 2 terms, and I was very disappointed in issues around crime and transportation. And so I was able to put those on the table because I was, again, an activist. And I think I actually won. I actually won in branding myself to be recognized as somebody who can work with a collective to bring about change. Now, the question of money is an interesting one. I'm an advocate for paying people better, especially in elected office, because you don't just want people who can afford to do it because they don't need to worry about salary. And I think that's a fundamental, hard conversation that we have to have, and not judge politicians for being paid a livable wage. It actually is not. And so,
yeah, I don't think people know that.
No.
The council members get paid here.
oh, I made less on council than I did at my first job at 20. Right? And then the expectations are gigantic. So it comes back to my point of vulnerable, right? We have each industry or person or organization feel vulnerable at some point, and we put our elected officials on the stage to feel really vulnerable and not be guided by sort of just populism or pressure, but we're not supporting them anymore.
But then we have the version of you now, and I would like for you to explain what you're up to, because it's amazing. It's mind-blowing. Talking about innovation, it just encapsulates all of that.
So where I have found my spot is being a founder, co-founder, and what I do is I am the team mom. Investors will scowl when I say that, but it is my job to make sure there's enough money in the bank account, that the team is healthy and happy, that we have the right strategic partnerships, and that we have a sound plan that we're going to implement. I am the co-founder of a company called Tersa Innovations. We have developed a microbial fuel cell that creates a current that takes mining waste, the tailings, the ugly ponds that are breached around the world. We are able to extract the metals, neutralize water, reduce carbon, and reduce the liability that either mining companies or government has on their books. We were just chosen at the World Economic Forum as a Sustainable Mining Top Innovator. We were showcased at that event in New York, Climate Week. I'm going to France next week because we've been chosen as one of the top 50 clean tech companies to watch in the world. Of the 50, 10 were chosen to speak. I am very proud of the fact that our STEM team is 80% women. The average age of those scientists is 1996. And what we are doing now is not only extracting metals like gold, copper, silver, which we need not only for our day-to-day lives, but we need it to meet our goals on electrification and net zero. But we are also doing it in a way that is turning waste into wealth, not only for the mining companies, but also for industry. It can't be either or. We cannot keep villainizing industry that did the best they knew how to do. It's like us. Parenting is different now. How we do self-care is different. Pointing a finger at industry to villainize them, I think is a really tragic thing, because what we're doing is actually limiting what we need to make sure there's neonatal equipment in hospitals, to make sure we have a phone and a computer. So that is what we're doing. I want to say that I have the privilege of speaking on behalf of this fabulous team of innovators. The research started in 2016 in UBC, and then we incorporated in 2021.
Okay, you guys missed the cue for applause. It's so inspiring. Now, Emily, you come across all kinds of innovations and founders. I want to ask you about what kinds of innovations that you've seen in the space of purpose and impact. But before we get there, I want everyone to get a sense of what you do, because it's fascinating. So you pretty much go to the world's top tech founders and you convince them to give their money to you. So take us through a day in a life. That conversation, what is that conversation like? What's the dynamic, and why do they say yes?
Some of them say no. So yeah, Founders Pledge has been around for about 10 years, and we have about 2,000 entrepreneurs who have collectively pledged now way more than, it's about 10.5 billion. And they are pledging that money to go to charity. They can choose what that charity is. We have a list of recommended charities that we think are really, really strong, but they do have the flexibility to give to anything that they want to. And I think the main thing that I've seen, I've been in this role for nearly 3 years now, is just that there's so much nuance. Everybody is so different. You think like, oh, our job is to speak to founders about impact. You think like, oh, every founder, that conversation will go similarly. it doesn't. Some people really understand the value of like pledging very early on in their entrepreneurial career and saying, yes, as and when I make money, I will commit to give to charity. For some people, they think that's crazy, and they're like, well, why would I do that until the money is real? Why, I'll do that closer to an exit. And so everybody is, everybody is different. One kind of interesting thing is the biggest pledger that we work with, he's approaching about $1 billion now in donations. The way that we were introduced to him was via somebody whose pledge value is really, really low. Like it's, not one of our top at all. In fact, he probably will never give. But he was able to make this introduction to this other founder who is like a big, big deal. And so the point there really is that I think this is something that everybody can take away, is that whether you have money now or not, or whether you might have money in the future or not, there are ways that you can multiply your impact by spreading the word, educating yourself, introducing other people to this idea. And that's what that guy did, which is, help to mobilize somebody else's billions, even though he was incapable of doing that himself. I think that's a really nice story.
So that's social connection, and we were chatting about innovation, right? So what kinds of innovations have you seen in this space of impact?
Yeah, so I mentioned in the kind of early on that I think the best nonprofits are the ones that are innovating, the ones that are using a lot of data. And one that is top of mind, because there was a Forbes article about it yesterday, is an organization called IDO. It's spelled EIDU. And they're doing some really amazing work in education in Kenya. They're using AI and machine learning. They've created these digital tools, 2 different programs, one that supports teachers and around kind of lesson planning and how they can create really engaging materials. The other program is about students and creating kind of tailored, personalized content for each student based on like how they're doing on certain assessments and things like that. They started working through private schools because that was the easiest way to get in, and then the Kenyan government was like, hang on, we want a piece of this as well. And so now they're working with the Kenyan government, so they're rolling it out across the whole country. And they can run both of these programs, so the teacher stream and the student stream, for $11 per student per year. So again, if we're going back to this idea of impact, if someone came to me and said, hey, I've sold my business and I want to give away $1 million, I care about education, how can I have the most possible impact? That's pretty cool. I can't do the math, but like $1 million divided by 11 is a lot of kids that you're influencing.
Well, we love data, as we know. So how do you measure yourself that you're making an impact within the organization that you're in?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of it comes down to that kind of dollar amount. I mentioned we've got about 10.5 billion that's been pledged. My job is to grow that number every single year, which looks like about $1 billion a year. And normally that comes from about 150 people. So yeah, constantly having conversations with people. Some of those happen very, very quickly. One of the largest pledges I worked on was 250 million, and that came from a conversation that I had actually at Web Summit. We were just talking about Web Summit. And it was about 30 minutes, and he signed the pledge, and that was worth 250 million. Whereas there's others that I've been working on for forever that are much, much smaller. And so that billion is kind of a combination of some little ones and then some chunkier ones as well.
So we want to see you in a place where you have all this financial success so you could start giving Emily some money. So when you think about all this incredible path of possibility that's ahead of you, what could be holding you back when you see the next couple years ahead?
So I do want to touch on the impact question because, I'm involved in a company now that is going to revolutionize not only, mining extraction. There's a $3.4 trillion opportunity. That is how much gold, silver, and copper is trapped in the waste from mining. But it's really hard to measure impact sometimes because when you're on a path, whether you're a founder, whether you're working on your degree, whether you're working on your small business, and there are days that feel really overwhelming. So impact can also show success as one person at a time, right? So on your team, with your employee, with some family members, just taking that time that we're nurturing enough within our own circle to make sure that that impact is good, because that is greater impact. And I think that one of the biggest challenges for women is it's harder to raise money. Last year was very difficult to raise money with interest rates. Having a team of young women, investors will come and say, well, your team, where's your team? And I said, these are the inventors that have taken this technology where we're pre-pilot and have money customers and ready to be deployed. That's not enough.
They're looking for the man.
They're looking for the experienced businessman, not just why. Not all. So the challenge is really about making sure that you get investors, but then the right kind of investors. I've taken a company public where I feel like I did a master's degree on how not to do it. So the challenge is money, the right kind of money, and then having what it takes to get through the really hard times. Last year was a really hard time. People locked down their wallets, the interest rates, right? People were happier putting their money in a safe GIC than taking risks. And so that's the challenge.
And I just want to welcome the men in the room, especially the entrepreneurs in the room, for you to understand what this is like. I have a group of friends. I came close to, no, I actually did this. I did this in Asia. That we rented men to go to meetings with us for us to pitch. And many female founders had to do that. Because even if that guy is sitting there not saying anything, they will not listen to you unless you had that guy sitting next to you. I paid for a guy to go to a meeting with Asian investors. Otherwise, they will not take the meeting with me. And that's very normal in Europe.
And that's where it's a good example of what I said, where we're creating a world where nobody feels left out, right? The young men on our team are equally as valuable, and they should not feel that we have to showcase the woman, because it's an anomaly, right? Why we do it is so that other women feel like they can do what, the 3 PhDs in our team are doing. Where we should have an environment is that young white men aren't feeling like they don't have the limelight either. And so we all have to do it.
I think we can wrap on another challenge that you face. And I forgot to tell you, to ask you, Emily, I don't know if you face this challenge too. But on the algorithm, on top of you inventing a technology, driving a company, being the mom of your team, you're also the mom of kids at home. How does that play in the whole dynamic?
It's a big factor. I have 3 children, and while I was waiting to go on stage, my daughter had an issue, and I had to order hygiene products to her at somebody's house she's staying at, Like, I'm always a mom, right? There is no time in my life, and my children are 32, 28, and 20, but half of my heart and mind is always with them. And so there is that challenge. I remember being younger and people worrying if they were going to hire me if I was going to go on maternity leave. Then there's this dilemma. Are you going to choose to have children or not? And either way, there's going to be a judgment on you, right? Either in your career or with your family or society. This whole new term of cat ladies is adding a whole new dynamic to that, not to get political. So that is, I think, something that we collectively have created this culture where we expect men to work outside of the home. And not that men are not good fathers and want to do the best that they can do. They are actually shamed sometimes for staying at home, right? Because the burden is still on the woman and the mom. And for women to feel this pressure of a ticking time clock, because we make the babies, we house the babies. We do have there's a ticking clock. Men have the privilege of not having to worry about that and can have children later because, there might be some challenges to that, but physically they can do that. So that's a whole gamut of conversation that I do think we need to support women with in the workplace more as well.
So, Emily, when you think about 2025 here, we need more funding. I'm raising 2, so we need funding, all of us. What is it that's top of mind for you? Cats, kids?
More of a dog person. What is top of mind? I think just how we can continue to build on this momentum. So, I mean, Founders Pledge was started in the UK. We've kind of grown fairly organically. We're in 45 different countries now, but there's so many more tech people out there. There's so many more ecosystems that we want to be a part of. Despite my accent, I'm based here. So like I want to build a community of tech founders here that are committed to giving back and are kind of exploring what impact means to them. So yeah, and just, I mean, every single year that we go up another billion, I pinch myself. I see the zeros on our system and I'm like, how is this real? So I just want to see that snowballing and snowballing.
Well, talking about sustainability, right? We create the cash and put the cash right back into what it's good, what feels good, what creates real happiness. Thank you guys for your attention for this topic. It was a joy to step out of AI for a second to talk about something that matters so much. Thank you.